Went to Rafa's beautiful home to watch NFL on Sunday, and we got into it. And I've said this before on the show that Maxx Crosby is touching the precipice of being the all-time greatest Raider of all time. And I got a lot of pushback from a lot of Raider fans, but I debunked all their Raiders. Now it's a sad state of affairs that I think that, because you think about it, I mean, don't say Charles Woodson because he left and came back. Don't say Tim Brown because that's ridiculous to say Tim Brown. And the only other acceptable answer is Jim Otto, who hasn't played in probably 55 years.
What about Howie Long?
Howie Long, one of my favorite Raiders of all time, right there. But I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know why I can't say he's the best Raider of all time. But either way,
so you wouldn't give the best Raider of all time to anyone who actually won a Super Bowl on the team?
That's the thing. Like, fucking Maxx Crosby's great, wonderful, but he's accomplished absolutely nothing. Like, literally nothing. He has 0 defensive player MVPs. Like, nothing. He's nothing. They have accomplished 0.
I can't argue that, but my rebuttal to that is he's changed the identity of the Raiders. For me, at least.
They're 2-2. They haven't changed anything. Like, what identity? This is the thing about it, that if you're how many Super Bowls Raiders have? 3, 4?
3.
So they have 3 Super Bowls.
Yeah.
Okay, 3 Super Bowls, and they were phenomenal in the 80s, right? How the fuck can a guy who's been playing for 5 seasons at defensive end with not even a defensive player MVP award is going to be the best Raider of all time? That speaks volumes of, in reality, how shit your franchise is, if that's who you're saying is the greatest Raider of all time.
Yeah, that I have no argument for, unfortunately, because it's been a shit show. It has been a shit show. So that being said,
like if the Steelers came and said TJ Watt's our greatest player of all time. Like, what? The Steelers would never say that. The Cowboys coming in and saying Micah Parsons is the best. No, not even DeMarcus Ware. Like, and how can the Raiders now, and so not that they're not irrelevant off the field, they're irrelevant on the field because they're very good year after year after year after year. For you to come out of nowhere and just say, oh, Maxx Crosby's the best player, best Raider ever, that's why it's outlandish.
According to, I looked it up, Bleacher Report has Gene Upshaw as the greatest Raider ever.
Also, a relevant pick for sure.
They have Gene Upshaw and Art Shell 1, 2, and then 3 is Tim Brown.
Art Shell as well. Hell of a coach, hell of a player.
Yeah,
all around.
Who would be your best Steeler of all time, Rafa?
The best Steeler of all time? Fuck. I mean, for me, I hate him. I thought he wasn't very good, but I wasn't alive at that time. But he won 4 Super Bowls. Has to be Terry Bradshaw, and then it could be Big Ben. It could be Troy Polamalu, Franco Harris, Lynn Swann. Like, there's a fucking list, and nobody will debate you on it. Like, it's like, all right, I accept that.
What about Dallas Cowboys?
Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, who else? Roger Staubach, Michael Irvin,
Tony Dorsett,
DeMarcus Ware.
Oh, come on. Tony was great.
I'm never considering Tony when you have the all-time leading rusher as a Cowboy. That's the thing. So you can't say Tony Dorsett when it's Emmitt Smith.
You don't even have Emmitt Smith in your top 10 running backs of all time.
But this is very true. But he's the all-time leading rusher on a team. I might have Emmitt in the top 10.
Dude,
I don't have him in the top 5. For sure, I don't have him in the top 5.
I feel bad because 100% that's his record. But, no one respects him or that record. Because there's so many. You had the best offensive line. You had a great team. There was holes. He gets 0 credit for that record. Barry Sanders would have passed you if he didn't retire early.
Everybody says if Barry was a Cowboy, he would have ran for fucking 2,000 yards every year.
God.
It's what people say.
Woo!
Unfortunately, that's not the way it worked out. Emmett is great all time, Hall of Fame, blah 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 blah. There's no, but a lot of people don't think that he was that great because the O line was so good.
CJ, 49ers.
The list is
He's like
endless.
Brock Purdy.
Brock
list is
Purdy,
endless
Nick
for the Niners.
Bosa, Fred Warner.
CJ's a big 7-year-old. Yeah, he was born in 19 freaking 8 or 2028 or whatever.
No, the Niners. You go Joe Montana. You go Jerry Rice,
Ronnie Lott.
Ronnie Lott.
you
I
can go
mean, the
Joe
list is
Montana.
endless.
Yeah, the list goes on and on. Like my personal is Joe Montana.
Yeah.
If you're gonna go all the way back, I mean, but if you are gonna go to me and Eddie Money's generation,
You still, it's Joe
I'm
Montana
gonna
still.
It's
say
Joe Montana, bro.
It's still Joe Montana. Will
No,
always
but I'm-
be Joe Montana.
yes, but I'm saying if you cut it off, like we always have the generational conversation. I'm saying if you cut it off, I would say Fred Warner for me is probably up.
Okay, listen, real quick. This is the problem that about generate. Like, you can't cut off that guy. The man had 4 Super Bowls, and I think with 4 Super Bowl MVPs, like it doesn't matter what generation he was in, he is 4 Super Bowl MVPs and 4 titles. Like that, you can do and then you said generation. Jerry Rice was considered up until 5 years ago the greatest player of all time.
I cut it off. I said if you want to cut it off at 2000, you obviously you cannot. That's why I called him the GOAT. That's why I said he's the greatest of all time. That's why nobody can reach above him. But I'm saying if you want to cut it off for younger people who don't care about the pre-2000s, then you're looking at more recent players.
Owens,
I'm
then.
saying Fred Warner for me. Or T.O.'s a great one. T.O.'s a great. I'm saying for me, Fred Warner personally, if you're going to pick one.
Shout out to Fred Warner. Guy is playing like a maniac.
I just think, Ed, when you sit there and say Max, and then we look at around the entire league, like there's no debate with a lot of the other teams. Like you take the Ravens, we know it's Ray Lewis and maybe Ed Reed, but we know it's Ray. There is no debate. And that's a team that's been around for less than 30 years. So we look at the Dolphins, we know it's Dan Marino. You know what I mean? We look at those teams. Fuck, we can go to Carolina. We know it's Cam Newton. Like, and those are new teams. Like, there's just, and for you to say, oh, with the Raiders, such a historic franchise, air quotes, and you sit here saying Maxx Crosby, a guy who in reality has done absolutely nothing.
Zach said, I don't know one person who agrees with that take, Eddie. He said you also had the Howie Long haircut in high school.
Yes, I did have the flat top with the mud flap going about. Everyone had that freaking haircut. Well, that being said, that was my little 2 cents on 98 and Maxx Crosby. Hopefully, we draft a quarterback in the next century, and he will be the greatest Raider of all time.